You might have heard, and this is something that I heard when I was younger and growing up, that actually 1 drink a day is good for you. And this was believed for a very long time. And I'm French, and let me tell you, most French people still believe that. And it's not their fault, it's because they just don't know the latest science. And a lot of doctors don't even know the latest science either. So let's talk about that. Hello angels, and welcome back to the Glucose Goddess Show. I'm your host, Jessie Introspé. I'm a French biochemist, and I love explaining science in a really fun way so that you can understand how your body functions. And today we're talking about alcohol. Very highly requested topic when I give any conference or any talk. Inevitably, one person asks a question about alcohol. So today I'm going to show you all the science behind it, what it does to our body, to our brain. Is it true that 1 drink a day is good for our health? We're going to bust some myths, we're going to have a good time, and you're going to learn so much. So let's get to it. The first thing I want to mention is if you've ever worn a continuous glucose monitor, which measures in real time your blood sugar levels, you might, and if you drink alcohol, you might have noticed a strange pattern. You might have noticed that when you have pasta on their own, you get a big glucose spike, but if you add, like in this graph, a glass of red wine to the pasta, all of a sudden, smaller glucose spike. Oh my God, what is happening? What does this mean? Does this mean that we should add wine to our meals to reduce the glucose spike because we know that smaller glucose spikes are better for us? No, I'm going to explain everything, but no, the answer is not to add wine to every single one of your meal. So before we get into that, let's rewind just 1 second. A drink of alcohol, whether it's wine, vodka, beer, is mostly water, about 80 to 90% water. Then it's ethanol, very important molecule. And then you have things like compounds that influence flavor. And then in some sweet wines, you'll have really high sugar content too. But ethanol, the second thing I mentioned, ethanol is a molecule we're really interested in because that is the molecule that is going to have effects on our body. The water and the flavor compounds, not so many effects. The ethanol, lots of effects, my dear. So how is ethanol produced? Ethanol is produced when yeast ferments the sugar in grapes or other plants during the fermentation process for various alcohols. And just for fun, I pulled the number of ethanol molecules in a glass of wine because that's the kind of stuff I love. So there are 10 to the power 23, so 10 with 23 more zeros behind it, ethanol molecules in 1 glass of wine. That is, fun fact, as many molecules as there are stars in the universe. Now you know. Fun fact. So in terms of the percent alcohol, if you're an alcohol drinker, you might know this, but beer contains 1% to 6% ethanol. Wine is 12 to 14% ethanol. Fortified wines like cherry and port contain 18 to 20% ethanol. And then spirits, the vodka, rums, and gins, are 40 to 50%. Time for a quick break to tell you about the supplement I have developed, Anti-Spike Formula. Now listen, in my years of research, I've understood one key thing. Keeping our glucose levels steady is the foundation of physical and mental health, no question. And if I could only take one supplement for the rest of my life to help me reduce my glucose spikes and keep my glucose levels steady, it would be Anti-Spike Formula. I created Anti-Spike with 2 really powerful natural plant molecules in it. The first one is mulberry leaf extract. And listen to this. In a review study of 12 randomized clinical trials on over 600 people, scientists found that mulberry leaf extract significantly reduces our glucose spikes after a meal by up to 40%. It also significantly reduces our insulin spike after a meal by up to 40%, and it reduces our fasting glucose levels by 8 milligrams per deciliter after just 2 months. So this molecule from mulberry leaf reduces the absorption of glucose in our bloodstream. It actually slows down how quickly starches turn to glucose in our bloodstream, therefore creating a massive reduction in the glucose spike of our meal. The second main molecule in anti-spike formula is a molecule from lemon called eriocitrine. It's the molecule that makes lemons yellow, but it also has a really cool effect on our gut. It basically helps our gut produce more GLP-1. Clinical trials show us that GLP-1 production increases by 17% after just 2 months of taking it. More GLP-1 means healthier glucose levels. I take 2 capsules of anti-spike formula every single day before the meal of my day highest in carbs and sugars. So go to antispike.com to see all the science behind these ingredients, to see testimonials from thousands of people who've tried it, and to order your own anti-spike formula bottle and try it for yourself. So what happens exactly when we drink ethanol? I think that's the main question that we're all asking ourselves. So let's look at what happens inside our body. As soon as we drink alcohol, it goes to our stomach and to our upper intestine, which is where anything that we eat or drink goes. From there, the ethanol goes into our bloodstream, and then it is recognized by our body as a toxin. It is kind of like a poison, essentially. It's something that our body wants to get rid of. Therefore, our body sends this ethanol to our liver. Why the liver? Because our liver is the filtration system of our body. It has a lot of work to do, especially if you drink a lot of alcohol. And that's why you might have heard, a correlation between liver problems and drinking alcohol. It's because our liver has a lot to do to get rid of this toxin. So what does our liver exactly do to get rid of this ethanol toxin? Well, it's kind of like, when you have a big cardboard box in your house, like you bought something and it came in like a massive box, and then you're like, oh man, I have to get rid of this box. Well, what do? You cut the box into small pieces, and then you fold the pieces and you put them in the bin. Well, your liver kind of does the same thing with ethanol. It essentially tries to cut it down into smaller pieces. The first thing that it cuts ethanol into is a substance called acetaldehyde. And now for sure, you've come across this substance because it is what gives people who drink alcohol that smell. You know how you can smell on someone that they've had a lot to drink? That smell is acetaldehyde. So the first thing your liver does is to break down ethanol into acetaldehyde. The problem is acetaldehyde is also very toxic for the body. And then your liver has to do another thing, poor liver. Then it converts acetaldehyde into acetic acid. Acetic acid, you might have heard me talk about it before. It is a molecule that we find in vinegar. Now, this molecule is not a poison. This molecule is safe for the body. And you might think, oh, well, if my liver is turning ethanol into basically a vinegar compound, then not much is going to happen to me, right? This is incorrect. You see, it all has to do with the breakdown speed. So your liver cannot instantly turn all the ethanol into your body into acetic acid. This process takes time. I want to show you a specific study that I think is so interesting. So this study is called Cytokine Changes Following Acute Ethanol Intoxication in Healthy Men, a crossover study. So in this study, and honestly, scientists do some amazing things, they gave young males 300 milliliters of pure vodka to drink on an empty stomach. 300 ml is about the size of a soda can. So imagine drinking all of this on an empty stomach of pure vodka in just 30 minutes. Yeah, pretty intense. And then the researchers tracked the elimination of ethanol in the body of these participants. And they found that it takes on average 5 hours for our body to get rid of just half the amount of ethanol that was ingested. So as you can see here, after about 5 to 6 hours even, you see that the ethanol concentration in the body of these participants is now half what it was at the very beginning. So it takes a long time for our body to get rid of the ethanol. And as it's getting rid of the ethanol, it's being exposed to ethanol, but also to acetaldehyde. So let's go back to this graph with the pasta and the red wine. So another thing you should know about the liver is that it's actually in charge of regulating the amount of glucose in your body. Now, when you drink alcohol, as I just told you, your liver is super busy doing all of these transformations to transform it into different compounds. And as a result, it doesn't have the time to manage your glucose levels like it usually does. And that is why you see this decrease in a glucose spike when you add alcohol to a meal. It's because your liver is busy with this poison that you've just given it, so it cannot manage your glucose levels as effectively. As a result, you see a smaller spike, but it's because you're poisoning your liver. So it is not a good idea, my dear friends, to add red wine to your pasta, even though this graph shows us something a bit confusing and something we could interpret as that. But again, not a good idea. If you want to manage your glucose levels, which is the foundation of physical and mental health, there is a link in the description of this episode for my 10 glucose hacks that are food-based, not alcohol-based, and that actually work and don't have any negative consequences. So download those if you want to learn how to reduce your glucose spikes. So what goes on as this ethanol and acetaldehyde are in your body causing damage? Let's have a quick look organ by organ so you can see what's going on inside of your body and your brain when you drink alcohol. So the first place to look is your stomach and your intestine. As I mentioned, alcohol, ethanol goes right there. And once it is in your stomach and your intestine, unfortunately, ethanol damages the cells that line your gut. And this leads to a few things. First of all, you can't absorb nutrients from your food as effectively as you used to, which is why in people who drink a lot of alcohol, we see nutrient deficiencies often. Second, as it damages the cells, it can actually lead to leaky gut syndrome. IBS, leaky gut, is such a common condition today, and we know that alcohol makes it worse. And finally, if that wasn't enough, alcohol kills all of the good bacteria in your gut. And you might know this because we can often use alcohol to disinfect something. And what does it mean to disinfect something? It means to kill all the bacteria. So ethanol is rushing around your body and your bloodstream, and it also gets to your brain. Now here what's really interesting is that we have this thing called the blood-brain barrier, which is supposed to protect the brain from pathogens, but actually ethanol crosses that barrier. The ethanol, the alcohol, makes its way into your brain. Yes, and here a few things happen. The first thing that happens is that ethanol makes your brain release dopamine. And as you might have heard me talk about, dopamine is the pleasure molecule. It gets released when we have sex, when we play video games, when people do illegal drugs, and when you drink alcohol. And the problem is, dopamine to your brain feels like a reward. So your brain gets tricked into thinking that this poison actually makes it feel rewarded. It makes it feel good and happy. And now some people get more dopamine than others when they drink. And generally, you're able to recognize yourself if when you have alcohol, you feel euphoric, you feel so happy, so excited, you feel so much better. That's probably because your brain releases more dopamine than other people's brains. Isn't that so interesting? So we each have a different amount of dopamine that gets released in our brain when we drink alcohol. And in fact, as you can imagine, people who are heavy drinkers generally have a higher dopamine release when they drink alcohol. It feels like more of a reward. They feel so good that they just want to keep coming back for more. The second molecule that gets activated in our brain when we drink alcohol is serotonin. Serotonin is the happy hormone, right? So it's the one that makes you feel comfortable, relaxed, happy, at ease. So you have dopamine being activated, which makes you feel pleasure and reward, and then serotonin, which is happiness, chilled, feels so good molecule. So there's a lot of stuff in your brain that goes on, and that's why people drink alcohol, is because it releases these two molecules that make us feel good. But then, this does not last forever. Once these get released and activated, then comes the shutdown. So other processes take over, and instead of just feeling really good and really happy, you're going to start to feel some of the toxic damage that ethanol and acetaldehyde are doing to your neurons. So let's talk about your neurons. Ethanol and acetaldehyde are going to heavily damage your brain cells called neurons. And specifically, they actually touch and hurt your neurons that are in charge of managing your impulses, of helping you be aware of your surroundings, the ones that manage good judgment, motor coordination, and they also suppress the neurons that are able to form memories, which is why you remember fewer things when you drink alcohol. So these two toxins literally suppress and turn off and damage a lot of neurons in your brain. And so when you feel drunk, that's actually the feeling of your neurons being damaged and suppressed. Another quite detrimental effect of drinking alcohol is that when you're a habitual alcohol user, the days when you don't drink and the moments when you're not drinking, you end up feeling worse during those days and those moments, and you end up needing alcohol to feel good again. So it's almost as if like your baseline of happiness and enjoyment reduces, and you become more and more dependent on alcohol to make you feel good. You develop a dependence. There's a study that I want to mention that I think is so interesting. It's called Effect of Alcohol on the Central Nervous System to Develop Neurological Disorder. And so this paper is super interesting. It goes into detail about the exact effects of alcohol on our neurons. And it explains that alcohol creates DNA damage in our neurons. And the errors accumulate over time and lead to dysfunction. So it's not like you drink, your neurons shut down, and then you stop drinking for a few hours and your neurons come back up. There is damage that accumulates over time in the DNA of your brain cells. Alcohol also accelerates the aging of our neurons and of our brain, so our brain ends up aging faster the more and the more we drink. And not only does alcohol kill existing neurons, it also prevents new ones from forming. And this can lead to all sorts of effects on processing, cognitive ability, memories, spatial awareness. Like for example, when somebody has a stroke, well, parts of their brain, some of their neurons die, right? And this can cause extreme symptoms and consequences. But with alcohol, it's like you're having a very, very slow, very, very, very gradual stroke. And we've known for a very long time in all of the studies that 3 drinks a day is clearly damaging to the brain. So if you have 3 drinks a day, every single day, that's a very slow damage, slow stroke, if you will. It's not a perfect comparison, but in terms of the effect on neurons, a very slow damage to your brain. And we've known again for a very long time that 3 drinks a day is really bad. But you might have heard, and this is something that I heard when I was younger and growing up, that actually 1 drink a day is good for you. And this was believed for a very long time. And I'm French, and let me tell you, most French people still believe that. And it's not their fault, it's because they just don't know the latest science. And a lot of doctors don't even know the latest science either. So let's talk about that. Is 1 or 2 drinks a day good for you or not? You guys know I've been doing my glucose hacks religiously. They are the foundation of my dietary habits. But adding the molecules and anti-spike has really allowed me to get to the next level in a few areas. 1, bloating. I didn't even know that I would get bloated. With anti-spike, I'm like, oh, I used to get bloated. I feel so much better now. 2, energy levels, super consistent. Eagle energy all day. And 3, cravings for sugar. I love sugar. I want to eat chocolate all the time. And anti-spike has given me a feeling of having a total superpower when it comes to my sugar cravings. I don't feel controlled by them anymore at all. It's truly amazing. And I know that these natural molecules are going to help my long-term fasting glucose and fasting insulin levels, which is so key to physical and mental health and to healthy aging. So go to antispike.com to see all the science behind these ingredients, to see testimonials from thousands of people who've tried it, and to order your own anti-spike formula bottle and try it for yourself. This belief was based on associative studies that showed that if you look at a big population, a big group of people, people who have 1 drink a day seemed to be healthier than people who had 0 drinks a day. And recently, scientists have started to see the main massive holes in this kind of research, notably 2 important things. Number 1, The main flaw in these studies is that previous heavy drinkers who stopped drinking entirely for health reasons were now in the 0 drinks a day category. But they were actually quite unhealthy because they probably were drinking before, but they completely stopped because of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, you name it. So now you had all these unhealthy people in the 0 drinks a day category. Interesting, right? And you also saw a lot of old people who had 1 drink a day and who were healthy. And they probably kept drinking 1 drink a day because they didn't have any health issues. It's not that the 1 drink a day was keeping them healthy in later age. It's just simply that because they didn't develop chronic issues and their doctor didn't say, you gotta cut out all the wine and the vodka, 1 drink a day was not causing their good health. The 1 drink a day was a consequence of their good health. So these associative studies now have been shown to be just heavily flawed, so we don't really rely on them anymore. But what we do look at, which is incredibly interesting, are 2 new studies that came out in 2022, which really helped us understand what's going on, even in the light drinking category. So the first study is called Associations Between Alcohol Consumption and Gray and White Matter Volumes in the UK Biobank. And this is from data on 40,000 people. And this study showed very clearly that just 1 drink a day was associated with our brain shrinking, death of neurons, cognitive decline, thinning of the brain. So this study showed us that even just 1 drink a day is accelerating our brain aging. Now, of course, aging and shrinking of the brain as you age is normal. This is not something that we can completely get rid of, but you have to understand that by just having 1 drink a day, you are accelerating this shrinking and this aging of your brain. Just 1 drink a day, which so many people are doing. So I'm not saying you should stop drinking, I'm just saying you need to weigh the pros and cons, and we're not totally done yet because there's more stuff you need to know. The second study to know about is called Association of Habitual Alcohol Intake with Risk of Cardiovascular Disease. And so in this research, they looked again at those big associative studies on alcohol and heart disease, because again, previously people thought 1 drink a day was good for their heart, and they showed that when you remove the confounding variables that I'm talking about, all the previously believed benefits of alcohol completely disappear. So now we know that this thing of 1 drink a day is good for you is not true. Alcohol, even at a very low quantity of 1 drink a day, is damaging your brain. And if you look at the brain of an old person, let's say if you know somebody who's in their 80s or 90s, you can tell their brain is not as sharp as somebody who's, say, in their 20s or 30s or 40s, right? That is aging of the brain. And the more you drink, the faster you are going to be in a state where your brain is unhealthy and old and damaged. Sorry, guys. Just gotta know the truth. Oh, and a side note on Alzheimer's, if you're predisposed genetically to Alzheimer's, drinking heavily increases your risk of actually developing it. Again, it's bad for the brain. So if your brain is sensitive, if your brain has any predispositions, if there's cognitive decline in Alzheimer's in your family, for example, it's a good idea to lay off on the alcohol so that you can prevent your brain from aging and damaging too quickly. So another way that alcohol impacts us is on our sleep. I'm sure you've made this experience. When you drink, you don't sleep as well. You wake up in the night, you don't feel super good in the morning because you haven't slept very well because of all of the alcohol. So specifically, when we drink alcohol, we have less restful and less deep sleep, and our brain can't do something that it generally does during our sleep, which is to clean up all the toxins from the day. So when there's ethanol and acetaldehyde in there, it doesn't clean things up, which is one of the reasons we feel so bad in the morning. Okay, some more negative impacts. I promise we're almost done with the negatives now. DNA damage in the cells increases the risk of cancer, inflammation, huge increase in inflammation in your body when you drink alcohol. And today, 2 out of 3 people are gonna die of an inflammation-based disease. Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, etc. are all inflammation-based diseases. Alcohol increases inflammation and it makes your immune function worse. So if you have things like psoriasis, eczema, arthritis, autoimmune diseases, alcohol does not help you. It makes it worse. And finally, cancer. So alcohol is defined as a group 1 carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And group 1 is, as they say, the highest risk group and includes other known carcinogens like asbestos, radiation, and tobacco. The connection between alcohol and cancer is so incredibly clear. And the more alcohol you drink, the more likely you are to get many, many different cancers, notably because alcohol causes DNA mutations. And the link between breast cancer is even stronger than for all other cancers. So in a study called Alcohol Use and Breast Cancer, a critical review, the results were very clear. Any amount of alcohol, even very light drinkers, 1 drink a day, increases the likelihood of breast cancer. And the more you drink, the higher the risk. So if you want to avoid cancer, avoiding alcohol is very important. And final thing I wanted to mention, fertility and hormones. Females who drink have higher experience of PMS syndrome, are less fertile, have higher levels of testosterone and hormonal imbalances in the body. Same story for men. Alcohol use impacts sperm quality and your hormones. So the picture is not so great, I have to say. Looking at all this, I was like, wow, people don't know much about all the side effects of alcohol, so I hope you've learned a bit. And now we're going to talk about hangovers. So kind of strangely, hangovers are not very well understood by scientists. There's a few different theories. So, they say something like alcohol causes dehydration, inflammation on the brain of body, alterations in your hormones, it dilates your blood vessels, and then your vessels recontract when ethanol leaves your body, so that could cause migraines. But basically, hangovers are still kind of a mystery, but we all know what happens after we drink. We get hangovers. I mean, some people more or less than others, but hangovers are the main consequence. And I want to talk about something that is so interesting about hangovers. So ideally, we would want to help our body process the ethanol faster so that the toxic ethanol and acetaldehyde hang around for less long in our body, causing less damage, right? So one important thing that you should definitely never have after you drink alcohol is to have Tylenol, acetaminophen, or any other products like that, because they slow down the metabolism of ethanol in the liver. So those toxins are going to stay for longer in your body and cause even more damage. Another really crazy thing that I learned in the science is that fructose, which is a sugar that's found in fruits, but also in sort of processed sodas, high fructose corn syrup, actually helps your body, your liver, process ethanol faster. That's not to say you should add sugar to your drinks, because when you add sugar, you're also creating different side effects from the sugar. But if there was a way to have sugar without having sugar, it would help our liver process the ethanol faster. But that's a sidebar. Don't add sugar to your alcoholic drinks. It's just an interesting little fact from the scientific studies. So if you have, for example, wine versus having a cocktail like you see on this graph, so the wine is going to cause less of a glucose spike because it contains less sugar. The cocktail that contains sugar will cause a glucose spike and will cause liver damage. So in fact, if you want to pick the alcohol that is going to be least bad for your body, go for an alcohol that is not mixed with sugar. So go for wine or beer or spirits with soda water instead of a heavy sugar cocktail, so that you don't give your liver 2 things to handle, the ethanol and the sugar, because that's a lot. So my dears, tips if you drink alcohol. This is my summary of the most recent research. Number 1, pace yourself. Drink slowly so that you don't give your liver so much ethanol to process all at once, so that the ethanol and the toxic byproducts don't stay in your body for too long, okay? So drink slowly. 1 drink an hour is much better than having 10 shots in 10 minutes, okay? So pace yourself. Second, eat food before you drink. Why? Because that's going to slow down the speed at which the ethanol will arrive into your liver. Again, giving your liver a break and helping it process things at a pace that it can actually handle. So if you want any ideas for recipes for a good veggie starter, for example, to have at the beginning of your meal before you have your glass of wine, link in the description of this episode. You'll find a PDF with some free veggie starter recipes. So download and get to it. You'll love it. Oh, another really good tip. Tip number 3, exercising. So there's a 2017 study that showed us that the most protective thing we can do to help our body counteract the bad side effects of ethanol is exercising. This study even shows that exercise can attenuate, reduce the side effects of alcohol on cancer. So exercise several times a week, as much as you can. It's also the best thing you can do for your health overall and longevity. But if you drink and you want to reduce some of the side effects, exercise is the absolute best thing to do. Tip number 4, drink far from sleep time, because again, we talked about ethanol having an impact on your brain. And then if you're having something sweet with a cocktail, that sugar is also going to impact your deep sleep and your restfulness when you wake up in the morning. Number 5, eat fermented foods like kimchi to replenish all your gut bacteria that was destroyed by the ethanol. So add that to your routine, add that to your day. It's going to help your gut heal. And finally, if you've been drinking, my dears, in the morning, I know it's tempting to go for something carby and sugary because you just don't feel very well, because you're hungover. But the best thing you can do is to have a savory breakfast with lots of protein, something that's not going to create a glucose spike, something that's not going to give your body even more stuff to deal with. So, PDF in the description of this episode, my free savory breakfast recipes. Download them so that the next morning, when you're hungover, you have a breakfast that's really good for you, and that's going to help your body thrive. So that was the episode on alcohol. To be honest, as I was looking at all of this research, I was quite surprised. I didn't understand. I knew alcohol was bad for us. I think I didn't understand the extent to which it affected so many parts of our body and our brain. And I kind of wonder, when we have this kind of data on the damage it does, why it's not treated today like cigarettes are treated, for example. Why have we increased the cost of cigarettes and put all these warnings on them to help people reduce their consumption, but we haven't really done that with alcohol? I don't know. So I hope that this was interesting, and I hope you'll draw whatever conclusions you want to draw from this, but at least you have the data. Alcohol is a toxin, it's bad for you, it does increase dopamine and serotonin in your brain, which is why it makes you feel good. And the rest is up to you. Lots of love, I'll see you next time.